My name is Elena, and for the past 2 years, I've been working overtime, saving every spare penny to give my parents a trip they'd never forget. Flights, luxury hotels, guided tours. I planned every detail down to the last dinner reservation. But as I stood there in my parents' driveway, watching my sister Clara get into the back seat of my car, I realized something I'd been avoiding for years. It didn't matter how much effort I put in. In their eyes, Clara would always come first. It was 6:02 a.m. when I pulled into my parents' driveway, 2 minutes late. My mom stepped out onto the porch, pulling her suitcase behind her. I forced a smile and got out of the car to help with the luggage. But then I saw her, Clara, emerging from the house with her own suitcase in tow. My smile froze. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My mom turned to me, her expression far too cheerful for the situation. "Oh, Elena, we decided Clara should come instead of you. She's been so stressed lately and she really needs this trip." My chest tightened. "Instead of me? Mom? I've been planning this for years. I paid for everything." She waved her hand dismissively, as if I'd just pointed out something trivial. "And we're grateful, sweetheart, but you're always working so hard. You can take another trip later. Clara needs this right now." Clara didn't even have the decency to look guilty. She just smirked, shifting her weight onto one hip. "Thanks for understanding, sis," she said, her tone dripping with fake gratitude. I stared at the two of them, my heart pounding in my chest. My dad shuffled out a moment later, avoiding eye contact as he handed me his suitcase. "This is unbelievable," I said, my voice shaking. "This was supposed to be our trip. Something for me to share with you." "Well, it still is," my mom said with a smile. "Just with Clara instead." "Don't make this a big deal, Elena. Your sister really needs a break." The drive to the airport was suffocatingly quiet, except for Clara's incessant chatter. "Oh my gosh, Mom, did you see that TikTok about Paris? I can't wait to go shopping there. Do you think we'll have time for that? Or will the tours take up the whole day?" My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as I stared straight ahead, forcing myself not to say anything. My mom chuckled softly. "Of course we'll have time. We'll figure it out when we get there." I bit the inside of my cheek. When we get there. They didn't even seem to notice I wasn't part of that "we" anymore. At one point, my dad cleared his throat. "Thank you for driving us, Elena. I know this probably feels unusual." I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Unusual? That's an interesting way to put it, Dad." He didn't respond. He just shifted uncomfortably in his seat, probably wishing he hadn't spoken at all. Clara leaned forward from the back seat, her voice grating. "You're not mad, right? I mean, this is really big of you, letting me go. I could never have afforded this on my own." I clenched my jaw and forced a tight smile. "Of course, Clara. Enjoy the trip." By the time we pulled up to the airport drop-off zone, my patience was hanging by a thread. As I helped unload their luggage, my mom gave me a hug. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart. This means a lot to us, and to Clara." I nodded stiffly. "Sure, Mom." Clara beamed as she wheeled her suitcase toward the entrance. "Thanks, Elena. You're the best." I stood there watching them disappear into the terminal, my chest tight with anger and hurt. The ride back home was a blur. I replayed the conversation in my head over and over, each word cutting deeper than the last. "This means a lot to Clara. You're not mad, right? You're always working so hard." I parked in my driveway and sat in the car for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then, without a second thought, I marched into the house, pulled out my laptop, and logged into every travel account I'd used to book the trip. Hotel reservations? Canceled? Tours? Refunded? Airline upgrades? Nope. I stared at the confirmation emails piling up in my inbox, feeling the tightness in my chest start to ease. They wanted to take Clara instead of me? Fine. But they wouldn't be staying in five-star hotels or enjoying private tours on my dime. When I closed my laptop, a sense of satisfaction settled over me. They could explain themselves to the front desk staff in Paris. I was done being their doormat. The calls started as soon as their flight landed. My phone buzzed repeatedly as I unpacked my suitcase, the one I'd packed so carefully for a trip that was no longer mine. The irony wasn't lost on me as I hung up my dresses and neatly placed my shoes back on the shelf. The buzzing continued, filling the room with its relentless vibration. I sighed, picking up the phone and glancing at the screen. My mom's name flashed across it, accompanied by several missed calls and texts. I unlocked the phone and scrolled through the messages. Elena, what's going on? The hotel won't let us check in. The reservation is missing. Call me immediately. Elena, this isn't funny. Fix this now. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Fix this? They really thought I'd swoop in and save the day after what they'd done. The phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Clara. I let it ring out, only for her to leave a voicemail. Elena, this is so petty, she snapped, her voice dripping with entitlement. Well, we're stuck here because of you. You need to call the hotel and fix it. Now. I rolled my eyes and deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. For years, I'd been their fixer, the one who smoothed over every mistake and picked up every slack. Not anymore. Eventually, I decided to answer, if only to stop the barrage of calls. My mom's voice hit me like a tidal wave of anger as soon as I picked up. Elena, what did you do? The hotel says the reservation was canceled and none of the tours are booked anymore. I let her rant for a moment, then calmly replied, I canceled them. There was a long, stunned silence before she hissed, Why would you do that? Oh, I don't know, I said, my tone laced with sarcasm. Maybe because you decided to take Clara on my trip. You're lucky I even drove you to the airport. We thought you'd understand, she snapped. Understand what? I asked, my voice rising. That years of saving and planning didn't matter because Clara needed a break? That my hard work meant nothing to you? Guess what, Mom? I don't understand. And I don't care to. I hung up before she could respond and turned my phone off, tossing it onto the couch. The silence that followed was bliss, and I felt like I could breathe again. If they wanted to prioritize Clara, fine, but they could figure out the rest of the trip without me. The silence lasted only a day. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing again with calls and messages. At first, I ignored them. I spent the day cleaning the house and catching up on work, but curiosity got the better of me by evening. I opened my phone and braced myself for the storm of texts. From my mom, Elena, you've gone too far. Your sister is in tears, and your father is furious. We can't get into any of the hotels you booked. From Clara, you're acting like a child. I don't get why you're making this such a big deal. Just fix it already. And finally, from my dad, we need to talk. This isn't right. I set the phone down, shaking my head. For years, I'd been the one to fix things, to make sure everyone was comfortable and happy. Now that I'd taken a step back, they didn't know how to handle it. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat down at the kitchen table, letting the anger simmer. How dare they expect me to clean up their mess? How dare they act like I was the one in the wrong? The next call came minutes later, and this time, I answered. Elena? My mom barked before I could say a word. This isn't funny anymore. We're stranded. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? I took a slow sip of my tea. Embarrassing? You think this is embarrassing? Try saving for years, planning every detail, and then being told you're not even part of the trip you paid for. Stop being dramatic, she snapped. Clara needed this more than you. And now she can figure it out, I said firmly. You made your decision, Mom. You wanted to take Clara instead of me? Fine, but don't expect me to fund her vacation. We're family, she hissed. We don't do this to each other. I let out a bitter laugh. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing. Claire's voice came through in the background, whining. Mom, just hang up on her. She's being impossible. That was the final straw. Enjoy your trip, I said, my tone icy. Oh wait, you can't, because it's not your trip. It was mine, and now it's nobody's. Goodbye. I hung up before she could respond and turned my phone off again for the rest of the evening. I felt an odd mix of anger and relief. Anger that they'd put me in this position, but relief that I'd finally stood up for myself. They could call me dramatic all they wanted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't letting them take advantage of me. The next few days were blissfully quiet. With my phone turned off, I finally had space to think clearly, free from the barrage of guilt trips and accusations. I spent my mornings sipping coffee on my back porch, enjoying the calm I'd craved for so long. My afternoons were filled with work and catching up on little projects I'd been putting off. Things that reminded me how capable I was when I wasn't bogged down by their endless demands. But by the third day, curiosity got the better of me. I turned my phone back on to find over a dozen voicemails waiting for me. The first few from my mom grew increasingly hysterical with each one. "Elena, you need to call me back right now. This has gone too far. I can't believe you're doing this. You've humiliated us. We're your parents. How could you treat us this way?" Then came Clara's messages, full of the same entitled tone she'd always used. "This is so petty, even for you. You're ruining everything. Just fix it, Elena." And finally, my dad's voice, quieter, but no less pointed. "Elena, I don't understand what's happened to you. Call us back so we can sort this out." I hesitated before listening to the final voicemail, a long one from my mom. Her voice was quieter this time, tinged with frustration and exhaustion. "Elena," she began, "we're back at the airport now. The trip is ruined, and I hope you're happy with yourself. Your sister is devastated, and your father and I are... well, disappointed doesn't even begin to cover it. Call us when you're ready to talk." I deleted the voicemails without replying. I wasn't ready to talk, and honestly, I didn't know if I ever would be. As the hours passed, I found myself reflecting on all the times I'd been overlooked or dismissed. Every holiday where Clara's whims dictated the plans. Every family gathering where my accomplishments were treated as afterthoughts. This trip had been the breaking point, but the cracks had been forming for years. That evening, my best friend Mia stopped by unannounced, carrying 2 cups of coffee and an unmistakable look of curiosity. "I heard about what happened," she said, setting the coffee on the table. "Your mom called me yesterday." Of course she had. My mom had always been good at recruiting allies when she wanted to guilt me into compliance. "And?" I asked, taking a sip. Mia shrugged, a sly smile creeping across her face. "I told her you were probably busy and would get back to her when you were ready." I laughed, shaking my head. "You're the best." "No, you're the best," she said, her tone suddenly serious. "Because you finally stood up for yourself. I know how hard that is, Elena. Don't let them drag you back down." Her words stuck with me long after she left. Mia was right. I'd spent too long bending over backward to please people who never seemed to care about my efforts. It was time to break that cycle once and for all. By the time the weekend rolled around, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The anger was still there, simmering under the surface. But it was joined by something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. Freedom from their endless expectations. Freedom from being the family's fixer. Freedom to finally live on my own terms. But as expected, the silence didn't last. It was Sunday afternoon when I finally got a call that I decided to answer. This time, it was my dad. "Elena," he began, his voice heavy with weariness. "Your mom wanted me to call. She thinks you'll listen to me." "Go on," I said, leaning back in my chair. He let out a sigh. "Look, this has all gotten out of hand. Your mom's upset, Clara's furious, and, well, it's just a mess. But you're better than this." I stiffened. His words ignited a fresh wave of anger. "Better than what, Dad? Standing up for myself? Refusing to let you walk all over me again? That's not what I meant," he said quickly. "It's just, you've always been the reasonable one. The one who keeps everything together. This isn't like you." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You're right, it's not like me, because I'm not bending over backward to clean up your mess." He paused, and for a moment I thought he might finally see my side of things. But then he said, "You're punishing the whole family over one decision. Is that really fair?" "Fair?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you and Mom decided I wasn't important enough to be part of the trip I planned? Was it fair when you replaced me with Clara like I didn't matter?" That's not what we were trying to do, he said, his tone defensive now. We just thought Clara needed it more. Of course you did, I snapped. You always think she needs more. More attention, more support, more of everything. And I'm always the one expected to sacrifice for her. Not anymore. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, he said, I don't know what you want me to say. I don't need you to say anything, I replied, my voice steady. I just need you to understand that I'm done being the afterthought. From now on, I come first. Goodbye, Dad. I ended the call and set the phone down, my hands trembling. For the rest of the day, I let myself feel everything. Anger, sadness, relief. It wasn't easy, but it felt like the start of something new. I wasn't the family's fixer anymore. And I wasn't going to be. As I sat on my porch that evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized something. This wasn't just about the trip. This was about reclaiming my life. But as the days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not yet. Because when my parents and Clara finally returned, I'd be waiting for them. And this time, I wouldn't be the one apologizing. Revenge is a dish best served cold, they say. But mine? Mine was simmering, forbidden, and long overdue. For years, I'd been the good daughter, the fixer, the one who bent over backward to keep the peace. But not anymore. This time, I wasn't just reclaiming my life. I was taking back what they stole from me. The idea came to me in the dead of night, as I sat in my dimly lit living room, staring at the canceled reservation emails on my laptop. My family was in Paris, stranded and furious. But that wasn't enough. They needed to feel the weight of what they'd done, the betrayal, the dismissal, the years of being overlooked. I opened a new tab and typed, Private Investigator. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Clara had secrets, big ones. And my parents? They had skeletons in their closet that even I didn't know about. By morning, I had a plan. It was risky, forbidden, and utterly satisfying. The first step was subtle. I sent an anonymous tip to Clara's employer about her creative expense reports. Within days, she was under investigation. Next, I leaked a few carefully selected documents to my dad's business partners, documents that revealed his shady dealings and cutthroat tactics. The fallout was immediate. But the pièce de résistance? My mom's secret bank account, the one she'd been using to siphon money from their joint savings. I sent the details to my dad in an unsigned letter. The dominoes were falling, and I was the one who'd set them in motion. The calls started pouring in. First from Clara, then from my dad, and finally from my mom. Their voices were a mix of anger, desperation, and disbelief. Elena, do you have any idea what's happening? My mom screamed over the phone. Your sister's job is on the line? Your dad's business is falling apart? And now he's accusing me of stealing from him. What the hell is going on? I leaned back in my chair, a small smile playing on my lips. I don't know, Mom. Sounds like karma to me. There was a long pause before she hissed, This is your doing, isn't it? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. They showed up at my house unannounced, their faces twisted with rage and fear. Clara was the first to speak. What the hell is wrong with you? She shouted, storming into the living room. Do you have any idea what you've done? I crossed my arms, my expression calm. I know exactly what I've done, and so do you. My dad stepped forward, his face red with anger. Elena, this has gone too far. You've ruined us. No, I said, my voice steady. You ruined yourselves. I just gave you a taste of what it feels like to be betrayed. My mom's eyes filled with tears. We're your family, Elena. How could you do this to us? Family? I repeated, my tone icy. Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me. Family doesn't replace you on a trip you planned and paid for. Family doesn't make you feel like you're invisible. So, don't talk to me about family. They left shortly after, their anger giving way to stunned silence. I stood in the doorway, watching their car pull out of the driveway, and felt a strange, mix of emotions, relief, satisfaction, and a flicker of guilt. But the guilt didn't last long. For the first time in my life, I felt like I'd taken control. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the one holding the reins. As I sat on my porch that evening, sipping a glass of wine and watching the sunset, I realized something important. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Because revenge, like freedom, is a journey. And I was just getting started. What will Elena do next? Will her family retaliate? Or will they finally see the error of their ways? Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones we fight for ourselves.